Good morning, everybody. My name is Jenny. Welcome to Miami Podcast. And today I'm so happy to have Ernie and Gina here with me. Thank you guys so much for coming and spending time with us. So you are the creators of Miami Food Family, which is super, super cool. I came across you just a little bit ago, and I'm so enthralled by what you're doing. So tell us a little bit about it, your background, and how this super cool thing came to be.
Well, thank you for having us, first of all.
You're welcome.
So Miami Food Family, we've always been in food, but we did have 2 restaurants, and we started Miami Food Family because we wanted to focus on quality, not so much quantity, like a lot of the trends out there. And we wanted to have a little of our culture kind of like focused in on the site, on what it is that we're trying to do, trying to showcase our culture and the kind of a little bit of the fusion, I guess you can say, with
of being Cuban American or Americanized Cubans.
Yeah, that's that I never would have thought that American Cubans living in Miami would kind of lose their roots and their connections.
Right, like a little bit of a detachment.
Yeah.
And we found that to be true, especially like working in downtown, having a food concept in downtown, and also even in Miami Springs, both locations where we had our restaurants, where even though there's a lot of Cuban Americans or Americanized Cubans, it tends to be that they're more Americanized.
Right.
So there's not really like a very big push for like that Cuban culture. Like you don't see a lot of cafeterias, you don't have ventanitas. And then as we go north to Broward or even Northern Dade or Northwest Dade, you also are kind of like separated from that very Cuban style food. And then in home, any kind of food that's convenient for the most part isn't Cuban.
It's
true. It's very Americanized.
Yeah.
And so raising our own kids, we realized that we were very separated. Like we had that food identity for ourselves growing up, but our kids didn't really have that because even when we cook at home, we bake a lot. We baked a lot. We did a lot of, the Dutch oven, very Americanized style foods, grilled chicken.
Right.
And other than having rice every night, there wasn't really a lot of like Latin feeling in our food.
Right.
And we realized that we were,
slowly detaching.
Detaching, right? Like you only speak English at home, where we grew up in bilingual homes or even more so Spanish home. And then next thing you know, our parents are telling us these kids don't even speak Spanish about our kids, and then your child can't communicate with their own grandparent.
And that's when the light bulb goes, because that's exactly what you're describing is exactly what goes on in our home. Like I'll make rice and beans, but that's as far as it goes. I won't do anything else that's like extremely Cuban that I grew up with. And now my parents are telling me like, we can't really talk to the kids or whatever. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what's going on? And then you get the guilt and that worry that your kids and their kids are kind of not going to know where they came from.
Exactly. And it's also that lack of the connection with the older generation.
Yes.
Not to be able to get those words of wisdom or the jokes or the songs or the lullabies because they don't understand it.
Yeah.
And, Ernie grew up with his grandparents at home. I didn't grow up with grandparents at home, but I did have a lot of family and my grandparents on both sides. I mean, we didn't all live in the same house. And my neighborhood was very rich in Cuban culture.
Right.
So even though my parents were Americanized, my mom got here when she was 8 years old.
Yeah.
My neighborhood did a really good job of kind of
supplemented.
Yeah. And it wasn't even intentional, right? It's just like a product of my environment. I just happened to, like last night we were trying tamarindo and the night before, and I had tamarindo growing up, like picking it off trees.
Yeah.
And Ernie.
I had never had it.
So did you like it?
I enjoyed it. It was a bit of an acquired taste at first, but I was like, wait a minute, this is good. Like I was trying to like connect and see what it tasted like.
Right.
Nothing that I could remember, but I enjoyed it. It was
it's
good.
Funny because when we started dating and we got married, I always felt that he had a more Cuban experience, right? Like he had a more Cuban upbringing because he had abuelita at home making him Cuban breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Yes. Like he had 3 square Cuban meals a day.
Right.
Where we had cantina. And then we also had I ate apricot chicken growing up. Like that was one of my mom's staple dishes, not Cuban at all.
No.
So it's funny because then I had really Cuban experiences like crema de guayaba, and Ernie had never tried crema de guayaba. He had only ever had mermelada de guayaba. And I'm like, how have you never had
That's
crema de guayaba?
I didn't even know it existed until somebody sent us a product the other day.
Yeah, and I was like, I grew up eating this. And he's only ever had like the difference for those people that don't know, it's like the clear jelly is marmalade.
Right.
And then the crema de guayaba is more like a dairy base. It's cream. It looks more creamy. So I wonder.
Is that one of our phones?
Yeah,
that's Ernie.
Okay.
He's the only one that's
My
good at
apologies.
silence.
It's an alarm. Just make sure to turn off the alarm. Or turn off the whole phone if you'd like.
Yeah. I'm like, everybody was like, silence.
No worries.
We started, through Miami Food Family, we've started to realize the differences between even our own experiences as Cuban American. I always thought I was more Americanized. And then I've started to realize that I had very authentic and different experiences than Ernie did growing up.
That's so
it kind of balances out.
Yeah, it is a balance. And a lot of the connection, I feel, or the detachment is sometimes, the connection to our culture is through food.
Mm-hmm.
And something that we were just talking about with the kids is that the quick meals that you do because of the time crunch and,
yeah.
For us, me growing up, I was in the kitchen with my grandmother.
Right.
And then you're outside on the grill with your father learning how to do things. So it was more of a family connection where you perfect your Spanish.
Right.
Because you're talking about recipes and cultures. And then it becomes a conversational piece where in today's day, when, we're separated and then we're in a rush and what can we go? And you just throw something in the pan real quick and you're done.
Yeah.
And there's no conversation.
The kids are waiting for the dinner to be ready as
Right.
opposed to being in the kitchen with you while you're doing everything. And I think that was just more of the cultural.
I think a lot of language and communication is exchange in what we like to refer to as sobremesa.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not so Cuban, but it's a very Spanish tradition.
Yeah.
And sobremesa is the act of just having a meal.
Right.
And the focus is on conversation. The meal is easy. It just kind of keeps flowing. And in sobremesa in Spain, we've had meals that have been over 4 hours.
4 or 5 hours, yeah.
And obviously you don't do that at home, but we still integrate the spirit of sobremesa every night at home as a family. And that's the time where we come together. There's jokes, there's catch-ups, and there's everything that has to do with it becomes cultural unintentionally.
Yeah.
When we have sobremesa with my parents, the other day we were joking around and my son Ari, we told him, tell your grandfather que es un caballo, and he started cracking up and he didn't know because he likes to pretend that he doesn't know Spanish. So he'll say things like with a very heavy, English accent. Yeah. So he'll say caballo,
Yeah.
And he said to my dad, mi abuelo es un caballo. And my dad starts cracking up and he's like, it, like tu abuelo es tremendo caballo.
Oh,
and he was surprised why he wasn't insulted.
Yeah. And Ari was,
sweet.
no, but he thought it was a joke.
Yeah.
So he's like, what does this mean? And then we had to explain to him, un caballo means like a person that's very good.
You're great.
You're great,
yeah.
And then my daughter, who's 21, says, yo soy una caballa. And we're like, no. And then we had to explain. And then it was so funny because at the moment, I couldn't remember the Spanish word for
Yegua,
right?
Yeah, it took me a second. When you said it, I was like, I know it's wrong.
Everybody started DMing me on Instagram and let me know that it was yegua. And then actually my Argentine friends say yegua.
Yeah.
So everybody was telling me, and then in English, it's a mare.
Right.
But we were joking because even at that moment, with my parents are cracking up. Now the kids are learning Spanish. We're having a connective moment and it becomes an inside joke, but it also becomes a cultural thing. Like now Ari knows the translation of dicho. We know the words for it in Spanish and English. We know the pronunciation because my Argentine friends are reminding me that it's not, don't forget the accent. So it's been very interesting to see. And it's something that we've kind of always been conscious. We've been conscious about it recently, but ever since we started Miami Food Family, we've been very aware of it, and when those moments happen, we kind of pause and reflect on it because it's something that we want to share with our audience. And in an effort to encourage people to also have that kind of play around food, play around stories,
it's so special because like you said, you're building memories and moments that are most likely not going to happen again,
Right.
It's a space that creates these memories that you're likely not to find anywhere else.
Yeah, at the table and in the kitchen while you're
right.
cooking.
When you could get them in the kitchen.
When you can get them in the kitchen. But sometimes, you know, we don't realize how curious they are about things because we're cooking things in a rush.
Yeah.
And for kids, you know what? Let's be honest, it's boring. You're throwing a chicken on a pan and you're done. But when you're doing something like picadillo, and then they're like, well, why isn't the meat in the end? Why are you putting the sofrito
Don't put
first?
pastas in mine or don't. I don't like, in our house, everybody has a different preference.
And then they want to learn. And there you go. Now you have the connection. Now I'm thinking back to being little, asking the same questions to my grandmother, and now it feels like she's in the kitchen with me, teaching him how to make picadillo.
Yeah,
I grew up the same way. Like I remember, you know, whenever I was not at school, just spending the days with both of my grandmothers in the kitchen, and like you say, like you just brought back so many memories, just silly conversations, gossip for the girls, you know, like it was so much fun. And I lost one of my grandmothers a month ago, and no, thank you. But I still feel so connected to her because, like, for example, last week I made her recipe for black beans, and it was like she, you know, somehow she was still there.
The spirit is very much in the
and
food.
It's incredible like that food can do that.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's crazy. One of the I think the best things I did, which a friend of mine suggested a couple of years ago, she said, your grandparents are getting older. Make sure you write down all their recipes. So I did that with both of them, you know, like whenever I had little pockets of time here and there, it was just like, okay, Mima, tell me, how do I make flan? How do I make arroz con pollo? Which I still haven't done. It scares me, but everything else. So I do see there's so much value in creating those moments and just stepping away from the rush, you know?
No, absolutely. And it's funny you say the recipes because we briefly talked about Cuento Caribe, which is a project that my daughter and I started to archive the stories of those generations before us in Spanish and in English. And on that site, one of the projects that we did was we went into Ernie's parents' kitchen, and his grandmother passed away about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. And she was an excellent cook and a great baker, but she didn't have any of these recipes written down.
No, everything's like un poquito.
Right. And like she did
what
have
does
it
un poquito mean?
Yeah,
you ask for the recipe and it lists the ingredients, and then it's just throw green peppers.
Yeah, un puñado.
Yeah.
That's what my grandmother used to say.
A la vista.
Puñado,
a la vista. A la vista.
What does that mean?
Yeah, it's crazy. And then his dad was obsessed with the idea of trying to figure out her panetela. Like there's a certain panetela that she had made that we were trying to replicate.
Right.
And even though she passed away 2 years ago and we were already aware of this, she had forgotten the recipes way before. So we went into the kitchen with them, me, Ernie, and my daughter, and we got Ni Sabía Pods, Cocina Criolla.
Yes, the classic.
Which is only in Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer in publication, and it now sells online for like $700.
I know.
So if you have a copy, make sure to save it.
Guard it.
Guard it with your life.
Gold.
Make copies. Yeah. What is it? Laminate it.
And if you haven't read it in a while, read it so you could laugh.
Well, that's the part I was going to say. Most of the ingredients or the steps are not really like you have to know. Like one thing is like Royal. One of the ingredients is Royal, crema Royal, or
what is that?
I forgot, which we had to look up, and thank God my mother-in-law remembers. And Royal was a brand of a baking ingredient. So I think it's like baking powder.
Something.
I don't remember exactly, but I think Royal is baking powder. I have to look at my notes.
Yeah, a lot of the ingredients in the book, they're giving you the name brand.
The name of the
products that don't exist anymore, and not what it is.
So you don't know if it's baking powder or yeast because it uses like the name of the product. So you need to have had experience with the products to know what the heck they're talking about.
Right.
And then also the measurements, you have to know the translation. So it was an experience because we were in the kitchen and Ernie's mom was able to kind of play translator for us. Or she would stand there and she would, you know, what does that mean? And then we're all like trying to figure out what the product was. And then we had a great time because we ended up making, the idea was to nail it. So we made like 10 different versions of La Panetela.
Oh my goodness.
And went writing them down to see if we knocked it. And then by mistake, I overcooked like one sheet of panetela. And in doing that, we figured out her bizcochos, which wasn't what we were trying to do.
Look at that.
Yeah. And it wasn't like we weren't trying to hit on it.
Yeah.
But because I overcooked it, it ended up becoming her bizcocho. And the moment we tried it, we were like, oh, okay, we don't have the panetela, but we got the bizcocho.
That's amazing. It was meant to be. It was meant to be.
Yeah, it was crazy. But how do we not? It was like a project. It was a day. We all committed to doing it.
And you were all together.
We were all together.
Which is the cherry on top.
Right. And it's kind of thinking of the kitchen like we do for Christmas, for Thanksgiving, in our family for Mother's Day. Easter is also a big one for us. Right. And making that effort to come together and to say, like, we're sharing these dishes. In my family, food is so big that we all have signature dishes, Oh,
that's so cool.
My mother-in-law will ask what I want for my birthday, and I'll say I want her flan. And my son will say he says he wants her vaca frita, and then my mom has a different, like, her arroz con leche is excellent. So it's having that identifying recipe that kind of brings a piece of you to every experience,
Yeah, there's a transcendental value almost.
That's the perfect word. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, that person, they don't have to have passed, but they're in the room with you, and you can kind of connect with them through their dish.
Through their dish.
It's so, so special. I wanted to ask you, so what do you think is like the biggest reason why American Cubans or Americanized Cubans are losing those roots, that connection? I know we talked about the rush, but do you think there's any other factors?
I mean, I tend to blame a lot of things on technology.
Yeah.
I think the world continues to get smaller with technology. And I think that it's very easy, where before I was in the kitchen with my grandmother connecting.
Right.
Because
you had nothing else to do.
Cartoons were done from 3 to 5.
Yeah.
Cartoons were done from 3 to 5 after school. Right. And what were you going to do? Where now these kids are constantly on their phones, or they're watching a new show because there's a million options of all those things. So you're not, even if you're in the same house, sometimes you're not connecting with your own family. And I think really that, for me, that's the number one factor is technology, because there's so many other options that you don't focus on your own culture, and it's not present as much because you were not present as much.
And I'm going to say that to layer on what you said, absolutely technology. And then the fact that the content that's being created is not being created really by people like us.
That's so true.
So if you are disconnected and on your own, you're not watching people like us.
Yeah.
That second generation, that Cubanized American or that Americanized Cuban. If you see content online by Cubans, it's usually jokes or comedians, or extremely political.
Yes.
Which both have their place, but they're not necessarily for that Americanized Cuban. If you grew up in a house like I did, where my first language was just as much English as it was Spanish, watching the jokes, they're funny, but to a certain extent, like, I don't really connect with them.
Exactly.
And the same thing with the politics. I think that the politics are very important, but I'm not an overly political person. So at a certain point, I disconnect. So that entertainment value, where I want to see people cooking, where I want to see a drama or a comedy series, where is that being made by people like us?
Exactly.
And so I'm getting, that exposure when you're on the computer is being exposed to very Americanized, ideals. And whatever it is that's at the forefront of what's happening in the US is what's really in front of you at the moment. Yeah. And for the most part, it has yet to be about us.
Exactly.
And not to say that it's about us. It's just there's not content for Latinos or Latinas, and even
by Latinos and Latinas.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because that's always been a very big thing for us. Unless it's in Spanish.
Yes.
And that is also something difficult for us. We don't really watch a lot of Spanish TV.
Yeah, neither do we. Yeah. Which, it's a whole other.
It's just a different style.
Yeah.
It's
definitely a different style. It's not anywhere near what we're used to watching. You want to have you hope that you see like a closer connection to like a closer tie. But even if somebody says, this is a really good show in Spanish, in all honesty, we can't even understand what you're saying.
Yeah. Right.
Sometimes not that, I mean, we speak Spanish, we are fluent in Spanish, but it's a different dialect.
It's
almost like where Que Pasa USA? Like Que Pasa USA was like 30 years ago. Yeah. Super successful. Everybody connected to it. And then that's it. We haven't seen anything really like that again. And it always strikes me as so amazing. The closest thing that we got to it, which was more like a telenovela than like a sketch comedy, was Jane the Virgin.
Yes.
And that we were like, oh my gosh, this is, relatable. It's super fun. It feels like you identify with it to a certain extent, but it more so because it was so much like the telenovelas that we grew up watching. Not really like it was personal experience.
Right.
It was more
just
about
mocking a little bit of
the telenovelas that we were forced to watch because
with your abuela wouldn't change the channel.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where the comedy came from. But other than that, like no game shows.
No, it's true.
It's
true.
So that's kind of, I think, why we're getting further and further away from our roots, because we don't have a lot of writers, directors, producers, even actors that are in the thick of it, like Miami-based creators.
Right.
Andy Garcia has tried, as far as I know, so many times, and I feel like he's never supported by.
That's true.
By Hollywood on what it is that he wants to do.
The Lost Island, right?
The Lost City was
the Lost City thing.
movie.
The Lost City.
Yes, it was.
That was an amazing film.
But I believe he's also tried to do other projects that just.
And didn't that one alone take him like a decade to be able to make?
A long time.
It's
he also had a very difficult time finding financing, from what I've read.
Yeah.
And then it came out and it was an excellent film. But it's like one and done. I'm a reader, and just now I'm starting to see more Cuban American writers, which is really exciting for me, and a poet laureate, Richard Blanco, which was the poet laureate for the inaugural poet, rather, for the Obama administration. The Prince of los Cucuyos, if you've never read it, it's excellent, and it's very much the Miami experience.
Awesome.
So you see, like,
I'm gonna add that to my list.
We're kind of like, it's moving, but it's been like
slowly,
un poquitico, and then it disappears, and then un poquitico más, and then it disappears. And I would like it to be like a storm, like it just comes and like.
We should have our own channel.
We should have our own channel.
We should.
That's a good idea.
Just a bunch of different shows.
And I just added myself to your channel.
Yeah,
like, we should.
Let's do it.
Yes.
Everybody needs a talk show in the morning.
Celebrity chefs.
Yes.
Even celebrity chefs. There's not really any Cuban celebrity chefs.
It's true.
What
was it like when we were kids? Was it Pepe? No, Pepín.
Chef Pepín.
Was he even Cuban? No, he
No.
No, see, never. It's your point is proven. We can't even think of one.
I'm trying to think. No, there's
no,
somebody.
Right?
There's somebody.
I can't. He's the only one that comes.
Remember after.
No.
Tonight. When you're brushing your teeth, you'll be like, "Oh,
yeah." I'm trying to think.
Do people comment here? Somebody comment.
Let's see. Do we have comments? I can't read from far.
But there.
We'll get to your comments if there
is a comment.
Yeah, if there are some out there, we will answer them.
I'm trying. No, I don't think of any. I can't think of anybody. Somebody I'm sure will mention.
Yeah.
And if it did, it's definitely in Spanish.
You're right.
I don't think I've ever seen.
You're right.
The most. I mean, Que Pasa USA was so instrumental in my life as a creator, as a viewer, as an audience, that like I have the box set.
You do?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was thinking about purchasing that about a month ago. My husband and I rewatched it on YouTube. I'm like, I should really just go ahead and buy it.
You have to buy it.
Yeah, because we love it. We love it.
I took it to my labor and I watched it during my birth.
That's amazing.
So it's something that's just I want more of it, and I feel like if I watch it enough, or encourage the people,
did capture in a timeless way, because like you said, it was 30 years ago, but we can still laugh and relate. Probably more.
Well, we can. Our kids cannot.
Yeah, I tried to show it to my kids, and they were like, "This is funny," but I chucked it to they're still too little. Like I'm not giving up. I'm gonna make them watch it again in a couple of years.
Our girls who are 21 and 23, they find it funny.
Yeah, but they're still I mean, they have great grandparents,
right?
So the connection is still there for them to relate a little bit of what they've seen here and there.
Oh, my daughters were born with tatarabuelos.
That's amazing.
We're a very young family, so they had tatarabuelos when they were born, 2 of them, and then they had.
And tatarabuelo, for those who don't know,
is great grandfather and great grandmother.
Yeah,
and then
that's such a blessing.
Recently, they still have bisabuelos because I have 2 grandparents that are still alive, thankfully, and so I mean, my daughters are 23 years old, and to still have a bisabuela,
that's the best.
So I guess maybe they get the jokes from Que Pasa USA a little bit more because
they have the background
more.
Yeah. For sure.
But if you don't have that experience, you know, we have a lot of friends whose grandparents or whose even parents have passed early on, and then their children are being raised in a very Americanized way. You know, the amount of Spanish that they get is Spanish class in public school, or, you know, in school rather. And that's really not.
It's not enough.
And it's Castellano that they teach in
it's not Cuban.
Well,
it's Cuban Spanish.
It's not even the Spanish that we know.
Yeah.
I mean, like Castellano is very formal.
Very Spanish.
Yeah. It's Castilian for
it's the TV I don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I wanted to ask you, so why do you think we have this innate need to connect to our roots? Because I feel like whether we realize it or not, we all have that little like.
I think about that all the time, and I wonder, is it just something that's in us? Because it's not something that I imagined when I was young. I don't know if it's because it's what you see and it's the example you get and you kind of just go with it.
Right.
But for me, as we touched on before, it's almost like when I make croquetas in the kitchen, I'm thinking of my grandmother because I was with her, and it's almost like it's a memory that connects. And then when I see my kids trying to do it with me, it's overwhelming joy, and you know, like it almost brings a tear to your eye. Even right now, I get like a little emotional thinking of my grandmother there, while also with my son. Like you're passing that on, you know, as opposed to, like I said, you know, dinner's ready and you throw chicken tenders in the oven, you know, or toss something in a pan real quick and you're done. That experience of passing it on,
the human connection.
Yeah, you know, it's like their memory lives on, and it's important to keep touch with that. Like, it's
funny that as you said that made me think, like, the technology that you said that it's kind of impeding on our culture, but is also impeding on our human connection.
Yes.
So, you know, if you have a child, and we have feelings about screen time, and it's funny because we're content creators.
Yeah.
So we're on the screen.
But maybe that's what makes you more aware.
Right. Well, I think it's just what makes us hyper aware is that need. Like, we're very connected. Our favorite part about being in the restaurant industry was serving.
Right.
You know, and having that connection with people talking with people. We're very social, even though he's somewhat of an introvert. Like, once you get him going, so we hunger for that connection. And then my setback or my concern with screen time isn't necessarily what they're watching, because I think that there's a lot of content that's very good, you know, and there's a lot to be learned now. Like, there are things that we know about now that we would have never known had it not been for for these devices. But it's that loss of connection. You know, if your child is in the bedroom watching on a screen or watching TV while you're in the kitchen, like, that's less personal time.
It's true.
And so now that connection with a grandparent is even less important to them, or that familial history is even less important to them, because they're like, but why? I don't understand. Why is this important to me? Like, what do I need this for?
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of times as parents, we have to remind ourselves that our children don't really need to make the decisions, nor do they need to understand everything fully. They just kind of like, well, right now, this is what we're doing. That's the way that we roll in our house. Like, I can't explain everything to you because there's some things that cannot be explained.
Right.
I just need you to understand that right now you need to be in the kitchen with me, and this is what we're doing as a family.
Exactly.
And then 5-10 minutes after they get over they
start enjoying themselves.
They start to enjoy themselves. Stories, experiences are shared from there. Ideas, like, they'll come up, you know, our son will tell us, why don't you do this?
Yeah.
You know, how about we use this? And so they're putting their mind to use in a different way. But they're also engaged in that human connection, which I think is a really big pool for us.
And they might not be aware of it now. Sorry to interrupt you. No. But when they're older, those roots you've already, you know, for lack of a better word and metaphor, you've planted them, and they have that connection to who they are. Because like you were saying, I don't really know why, but we all yearn and need to know where we come from. I mean, it grounds you. It almost,
look at the 23andMe. Like, people even want to know their DNA.
Yes, it grounds you, and it makes you feel in a way safer to know that there's this whole history behind you. You know, you have the whole army of people that came before you to kind of create a base and build you up.
And these stories.
Yeah.
You know, like, we each have our personal history.
Yeah.
And having that connection with our previous generations or with our elders builds that history. And we've always been big about
connection through food.
Well, connection through food, but I think that the most magical part of food is the stories that come from it.
Absolutely. I have a memory with every dish that we make that is Spanish. I always think of one specific memory
or person
Mm-hmm.
making a dish or having it, you know.
And that's a cool thing about Miami Food Family, that because we've made it our mission to connect on a deeper level.
Yeah.
Even with Cuban concepts or Americanized Cuban, have, you know, say what you will, it's getting us out into the community and meeting these people that are doing similar things or that are trying to really hold on to their roots and culture. And so then, you know, maybe Ernie's abuela's picadillo won't, I'm sorry, the picadillo is my dish. It's not your grandma's picadillo, but like Ernie's grandma's vaca frita has been a big thing in our like in our content even. Like he does, I don't even know how many things with vaca frita. We're constantly putting vaca frita out there. But then we go out and we meet people that either really love it or make it in a different way. Or
are really disconnected.
Yeah.
And want the simplest of things. Like there were people that didn't know how to make Cuban coffee that are Cuban. They'll go to a restaurant, they'll order it. They'll go to a family member's house and drink it. But they had no idea how to make it on a mocha pot at home.
Right, in a mocha pot.
Yeah, that's so true.
And I thought they were joking. They were like, oh, thank you so much. I didn't know how to do that. I'm like, oh, come on, don't be silly. They're like, seriously,
really?
I've never done coffee. I didn't know how to.
Well,
I just always went.
You hadn't used a mocha pot in years.
But I knew how to use it. I just hadn't I had to refresh myself.
Because everybody upgraded to the electric espresso makers with the little steam wands where they sacan la cosita from the side.
Which is not meant for that, but hey.
It's not.
Yeah.
So like in his parents' house, that's the first time I had drank it like that. In my house, we always had a mocha pot.
Right.
Which is so funny because my house is more American.
See? You know? That's interesting.
It's a weird thing. So when we first started, like I've always made espumita a mano. Where in his house, his parents who like are Cuban as Cuban can be.
My father doesn't speak a word of English.
They use the
little machine, you know. Like I think it's just for them, like an upgrade.
Yeah, like I'm tired of doing this over and over.
But it's
again.
not the same.
It's not.
It doesn't
it's
come
really
out
not.
No, it doesn't come out the same. It's not.
And it doesn't taste the same either.
No, it tastes how wow.
Yeah, yeah, it's true.
So I'm like, no, if I'm having my espumita,
So another thing I love about your content, and I don't know if you did this purposely, but not just Cuban American or American Cubans can enjoy it. I feel like you're opening up our culture to the world. If anybody wants to learn about what it's like to be Cuban, they can come to you and they'll get it. You know, from vaca frita to coffee to tostones. And I think that's so interesting and important.
That's a huge compliment. Like I think that's the best compliment.
It's not just about dishes. We're trying to share something.
Yeah, just like the way you
even just
you
a
talk
component,
to each other.
You know, a specific ingredient can be used in other ways. Like we use the orange marmalade that the guava company sent in orange chicken that we made.
Right.
Just to show, you know, you can
how things.
There was a lot of Cuban Asians that made amazing food, which we were talking about the other day. I'm like, I would love to make like a Cuban fried rice. Like, what is it that how did they make it? Did they still make it super traditional? Because each time there's a migration, a very traditional dish gets kind of a little spin on it. So if there's, you know, Chinese, Koreans, Vietnamese, anybody that ended up in Cuba for XY reason, you're limited on supply. So there's kind of like this morphing of a recipe, which then becomes like a Cuban fried rice.
Right.
And so we were talking about it the other day. I'm like, I wonder how we can, would we make an authentic Cuban fried rice? Or does somebody in our family know, like somebody in our family has to have had it and said, oh no, this is the way they made it.
Yeah.
You know, or this is the
Well, my grandmother used to make Cuban fried rice all the time. You just reminded me.
See?
What did she put in it?
Ooh, chicken. And then the rice, she would make just regular rice and then mix everything up and add the soy sauce, an egg and the scallions. And sometimes pork.
I feel like I need like Cuban differences. Yeah, pork, pork.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what we
I feel like maybe the difference might be in the rice. Like the way the rice is made.
Yeah, because we have like jazmín or
we have
instead of sticky rice. Maybe. I don't know.
Yep,
that's our next project.
But that's one thing a lot of people who are not Cuban don't realize, that our culture is made up and influenced by so many different. I think it might be safe to say, I don't want to get in trouble, that we are the first real melting pot of the world, because we have everybody is Cuban, Jewish, Chinese,
It's just a tiny sampling. That's the thing, that it's such a small amount. Yes.
Yeah, we have so many that just migrated there and became, their culture melted with our culture. So there's a lot to explore.
It was one of the first parts of land that was colonized.
Yeah.
Even before the US.
Yeah.
And it was confused for Asia.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because people forget that was like one of the first landing spots.
Yeah, literally
one of the first landing spots, and everybody pretty much landed there at some point.
Right.
That they moved on
and had their
because of limitations or whatever. But still, but I think that it's like just a tiny amount of each thing.
Yeah.
So it doesn't impact at large because everybody's like, oh, but there's only like a handful of Italian Cubans, and there's only a handful of
we exist.
Cuban Jews.
We're there.
Yeah,
yeah,
we exist. We have so
true.
many. I mean, if there was a DNA, like a 23andMe, we don't do that kind of stuff.
I haven't done it either. I have a friend that started the process, and he's enjoying it a lot. So I'm kind of questioning. Maybe I'll try it at some point. Not yet.
That Ancestry.com definitely doesn't work if you're Cuban, because all our records are gone.
Well, that's the thing, that I don't even know if it's worth it, because like I know it would get just up to my grandfather, because then like his birth record is completely erroneous. It even has the wrong year. I'm like, how the heck did you guys mess that up?
Right. Well, because you had to go. A lot of births were at home.
Yeah, and then the parents wouldn't go. They would go like when the kid was 5 years old,
right,
to go register them.
Right,
and
they forgot the date.
Yeah, sometimes they would.
Or they would do it wrong, like the clerk or whatever.
And it's not just Cuba. Like that happens in the U.S. as well.
Mm-hmm.
But more so in Cuba, where the office that you would go.
Right. So if you were born on Saturday, but the office open on Monday, they were like, Monday it is.
Sure, yeah.
Write that date down. Yeah.
Right. And the misspellings and all that crazy.
Yeah.
But
yes, the spellings. Oh my God, that's so funny.
It's crazy.
So I want to ask you, what's your favorite recipe to make at home together? Like your number one.
We don't cook together.
You don't?
No, I feel like we each do certain dishes.
We're like each other's sous chef, right? So if he's making something, I'll pull things out for him, or I'm recording him.
Okay, I see. Yes, that makes sense.
It's typically like divide and conquer.
So individually, what would be
what's your favorite thing to make?
We're being pointed at.
Howard, what does that mean?
We're at 37.
We're gonna break the what is it? The fourth wall. You're just gonna talk to you. I don't know what that means. Thank you.
Oh.
So, your dishes.
What's your favorite?
Your go-to?
Anything with vaca frita.
Oh, of course. That's amazing.
You just learned how to make vaca frita from your mom the other day.
No. I think for me, it's always
you made
the croqueta.
Yeah.
Making croqueta, like trying to get to the point where I nail it like my grandmother used to do it, which I still have not tried anywhere. So I'm trying to get to that point, and then exploring all these new flavors that I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
And maybe start manufacturing them.
That would be amazing.
One day.
You can't go wrong with croquetas ever. I feel like it heals the soul. I swear.
But it's so difficult to fry them.
Yes.
You have to really practice.
They pop. They're uncooked.
Yeah, the creamier they are, which is how I like to do them.
Yes.
And it's hard.
But you make them in the air fryer and it works well.
Yeah. You could do them in the air fryer.
I mean,
they might sink a little bit, but they're still delicious.
Yeah.
I would say, I don't know, I don't have a favorite dish.
Not garbanzos?
I do like making ice cream.
Ice cream.
So I like making helado. Like,
do you make what's the Cuban flavor?
Mantecado.
Oh,
yes.
I don't, because I think we would roll out of the house because that's my favorite flavor. So I tend not to make my favorite things at home.
It's so good.
Because then
her coconut and guava one is really
my coconut guava, yeah. So I like to make ice cream a lot.
Her American versions are really good too.
Yeah.
Well, and I make a like a Cuban coffee one. That's really yummy. So I would say ice cream, just because it's such a special treat, you know, and it takes 2 days to make. So when I commit to it, you know, it's really special.
Right.
So I make more sweets, and I'm also the steak cooker.
Yes. I've lost all ability to make a steak somehow.
Because he's always worked in fast casual and high volume.
Right.
And then our two concepts, one restaurant we had steaks. So there was different. But like the kids, I don't know if they just say that because that way I'm the one on the grill and the house grill. But so I love making steak for my son because he loves steak, especially eating it medium, and then making ice cream.
I'm also a big fan of hot sandwiches, so I try to.
Oh yeah, he's a sandwich king.
Guava in most sandwiches in some way or another, which we're doing a show on. So
that's awesome. Yeah, so we'll make sure to tune in for that because guava. That's it.
You have me thinking. You give me enough time. I'm like, I also like making gabanzo.
No. I will be there like, hey, we gotta stop it. Let's go.
Don't give me time to think.
Well, thank you so much for being here. We're going to have your information below so that everybody can contact you and watch your amazing content. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you.
And you got to share all these great stories and remind us that this connection through food is so vital for all of us, especially for those who have kids. Yeah, because they go hand in hand.
Yeah, there's one little skit, if you find it somewhere in our content, where my daughter tries to roll her R's. And we have a little back and forth as to whether or not a certain dish had like a double R, torrejas. So she's like arguing with me that torrejas is with one R. And I'm like, no, it's a 2 R.
While she's there going, torrejas.
Torrejas.
That's so funny.
So there's a lot to learn in terms of language.
That's amazing. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Come back in Spanish. So if you're interested, stay tuned. I know. Wish us luck. And we will see you next time.